You already know what's happening. It's Radiohead, one of the most famous bands to come out of the 90s. Thom Yorke, Jonny Greenwood, Colin Greenwood, Ed O'Brien, Philip Selway. Their discography is heralded, their trolling is next level, their self-hatred is second to none, and today we're ranking their albums. Now I have to make a bunch of references before I start the video, or else Radiohead circle jerk won't think I'm cool. It should be no surprise to let you all know that this is just my opinion, so please don't sulk about it, or else I will hit you with a metaphorical flan in the face in the form of ignoring your angry comment. What can I say? Karma's a bitch. I know I might be wrong in your eyes, but how do you expect me to please everyone? Simply put, I can't. So try to stay optimistic, and if you feel any vitriol brewing, please just suck it down like a lemon. And also, I know where you live. Okay, that's 14, baby. Let's go. In 1985, at a posh boys' school in Abington, Oxfordshire, England, 4 loser teenage boys decided to start a band. That band was called On a Friday because they practiced on a Friday, and everyone bullied them because of how bad of a name that was, and they were sad.
Is it true that it started on a Friday? That was that was your first name, wasn't it?
Sorry about that. Yeah. That was a bit of an error. We had to change it.
But this story has a happy ending because those teenage boys would grow up to be Steve Jobs. Share if this inspired you. No, they're not that cool. They actually just grew up to be Radiohead. Unfortunately. Listening to these early On a Friday demos now is fascinating. You can hear how much the group is pulling from bands like The Smiths or The Cure.
I've been away for a long while. The holidays made a change.
That's right. There was a time when Radiohead made happy music. In 1991, after college, the band regrouped and started playing music live again. They changed their name and began to incorporate more elements of grunge into their sound. Colin Greenwood also invited his brother Jonny into the band because he wouldn't shut up about it. After a solid year of playing pubs and pawning off their mixtape on whoever would listen, they finally got some heads turning, and shortly thereafter secured a deal with EMI for not 1, but 6 albums. So they took to the studio and released all that upper middle class teen angst that had been welling inside them for so long. The result? Pablo Honey, aka the band's least well-liked album by far. And I'm sorry guys, but I'm gonna have to agree with the Horde on this one.
Radiohead's worst album is their first album, Pablo Honey, released in 1993. And I think a grand total of 1 person in the entire world disagrees with me on that. For reasons we'll get into, it doesn't really sound like what one would expect a Radiohead album to sound like. It sounds more kind of like a project clout chasing the success of Nirvana and grunge. It does have its own spin on it, but it's not really what you'd call a groundbreaking album like the stuff they'd put out later.
But it's not terrible. No, it's just basic. For a Radiohead album, there's really not much sonic variety at play here. It's not atypical for a band's debut to be less complex than their later works, but in this case, it doesn't even feel reflective of the core ideas the band is known for today. Songs like How Do You and Anyone Can Play Guitar really do just sound like stock early 90s grunge songs, with some extra cringe sprinkled in. And I can barely recall them even right after listening to them. I also think Tom's least good vocal performances pop up on here.
All the things you got, all the things you need.
There's also a more emotional, somewhat sappy side to this album, evident on tracks like Vegetable or Lurgy. But even these tracks can feel a tad bland to me. These songs have a clear formula in their songwriting, namely taking a generally happy major chord progression and undercutting it with a slightly depressed vocal melody and lyrics. The result produces a song that sounds bittersweet. Generally, the songs on this album either follow the grunge formula or the bittersweet formula I just talked about, and sometimes it combines them. There's not really much variety beyond this, and listening to the entire album at once can feel quite repetitive. The lyrics are also a bit lacking all around in my opinion.
Chip or a serve, fat, ugly, dead.
One big thing that this album lacks compared to other Radiohead projects is diversity between the guitar lines. On subsequent projects, each guitarist had a role. Thom was rhythm guitar, Jonny was lead, and Ed played fills. That held true most of the time, at least. This means that many different later Radiohead songs layer different guitar lines on top of each other.
When I am king, you will be first.
But on this project, they all just kind of play the same thing at the same time, and it makes the songs sound less dynamic. There are standouts on here though, like the final track, Blowout.
In my mind.
This sounds a little bit more like the Radiohead I know, what with Thom's use of gentle falsetto and Johnny's use of slightly more complex guitar chords, like that central E minor 7 that drives the verses. The song also ends with an extremely tense sounding swell, which I love. But of course, you can't talk about Pablo Honey without mentioning which remains the band's most successful song to this day. Legend has it that Thom once stalked a girl through Little Clarendon Street in Oxford while feeling insecure about himself. Ultimately, he could not muster up the courage to ask the girl out, so he just went home depressed and then wrote a song about how he couldn't get laid instead. And the rest is history. It's no secret that the song isn't very well respected by Radiohead fans or the band themselves. But you'd be lying to yourself by pretending it's not still extremely popular. Personally, I think the song's fine. Is it cringe? Yes, but it's catchy cringe. Part of the beauty of this song is its simplicity. Simple chords, simple lyrics, simple instrumentation, and yet it's all emotionally resonant in a depressing kind of way. The music is just the right level of dreary, and the lyrics just the right amount of neurotic to create the most popular virgin anthem of the 90s. And at the end of the day, virgins deserve music too, don't they? It's also worth mentioning that Creep was the beginning of Radiohead's long-standing habit of taking a major chord and then transitioning into the minor version of that chord to create a gloomy sound. Pablo Honey isn't the worst thing in the world per se, but I'm probably gonna forget about almost every song on it again the second I end this segment. Overall, I think this album just kind of serves as a bit of an embarrassment for the band members, especially Thom, who I think knows he didn't give the best performance he could have.
We could just see so many holes in it that we had to stop. And I think that was a reaction really to like the first record being done in 3 weeks when we didn't know what we were doing, and yet having to live with it. Live with the consequences of that, just because we never expected anybody to buy it at all. We did it to learn.
The best song on the album is, in my humble opinion, the closing track, Blowout. Though Creep obviously remains the album's most important cut. Let's just be thankful that Pop Is Dead didn't make the cut.
Is totally made up. Pure fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction. It's an urban legend that never happened. It never happened.
I think it needs to be said that even though this album is second from the bottom, the gap in quality between this and Pablo Honey is very pronounced. I think this album is actually quite decent. It's also very, very, very close in quality to the album I've put immediately above this, meaning it was hard for me to pick which one, and I literally swapped them around immediately before filming this video. And maybe I'll regret that when I'm editing it, but it's too late now. I've sealed my fate. The King of Limbs, released 2011, is currently Radiohead's second most recent album and probably their most avant-garde. This album dials up the trademark Radiohead experimentation and dials down traditional songwriting to the point where a lot of these songs barely even have what you'd call melodies, relying more on just percussion, and it's quite a polarizing project.
The year was 2009. Radiohead had been on break for a couple of years, each member exploring solo projects, but it was high time to reconvene once again to produce a follow-up to the critically acclaimed In Rainbows. So, over the next 2 years, when they weren't distracted by new bands that they were starting or award-winning films they were scoring, they were recording what would become their 8th studio album. The King of Limbs. The first thing anyone will notice about this LP is that it's not even 40 minutes long, making it easily the shortest album Radiohead ever released. Not only that, but once you start listening to it, you'll also notice it's the weirdest album Radiohead has ever released. The tracklist, which is 8 songs strong, comprises some songs old and some new. But even though certain songs are being recycled,
Come on, Mr. Magpie. Good morning, Mr. Magpie.
that doesn't mean that the execution of these songs is recycled, because if there's one thing we know about Radiohead, it's that they don't like recycling ideas.
When an artist is repeating themselves because they think that's what people want, they're fucked. It's all over.
They always like to keep things feeling fresh and experimental, and I love that about them. However, in the case of The King of Limbs, you can tell that being experimental was their #1 priority. These aren't exactly tunes that you'll be humming in the shower.
What makes this album unique from other Radiohead projects is its emphasis on sampling.
However, unlike most who make use of samples, the band samples themselves. The tracks on here are built around short, repeated loops, decorated with little adornments here and there. Most of these loops are very percussive in their nature, and as such, form a good backbone for other instruments to come in on top of them. The opening track, Bloom, is a great example of this. These drum fills are so tricky that Philip Selway can't physically play them by himself, so other members have to hop on the drums as well when playing live. However, writing songs in this way obviously comes with a share of complications. Generally, these songs don't have as much structural variety as one may be accustomed to from Radiohead, due to a singular loop playing underneath the majority of most of these tracks. One of the songs on here that doesn't make use of looping, however, is Codex, which is a beautiful piano ballad with ethereal sounds poured on top of it. As the song builds, powerful horns come in to back the chords, and it sounds fantastic.
Slide your hand. Jump off the
In general, this LP is full of spectacular sounds in isolation. I think the issue some people have with this album is just that the songs don't come together into a whole that feels very worthy of the sum of its parts.
For reference, other Radiohead albums don't really have this problem.
Just look at the song structure of a song like Jigsaw Falling Into Place. Everything builds and the whole song feels like it's leading somewhere. Look at Paranoid Android. The song is telling a schizophrenic story in 3 segments, and the music itself reflects that. The sounds in The King of Limbs feel a bit more flat by comparison, especially tracks like Feral. The album sounds a tad less like a symphony and more like a collection of sounds stacked on top of each other. I don't think that was by mistake, mind you. This album was an experiment, aka can we create songs that don't follow a typical structure and are built on top of bizarre jagged loops? It was an intriguing idea, and I think the resulting album earns its title as a Radiohead album. But due to their alien nature, these songs aren't likely to stick with the listener to the same extent emotionally as other Radiohead songs may. I am a big fan of tracks with rough, looped guitar work like Morning Mr. Magpie, even though it's one of the most universally disliked songs on the album. But I think the best track on the album is easily Codex, which has more emotional depth than anything else King of Limbs has to offer. I can understand why fans who waited years for this album, especially coming off of In Rainbows, were disappointed by how empty this album seemed in comparison.
But at least we got to see Thom's moves.
green plastic watering can.
So how does this album compare for you two then? I mean, have you thought about it in comparison to Pablo Honey?
I don't know, I mean, I could listen to this one.
If I were ranking Radiohead album covers, this would be last. This would be so last. The Bends, released in '95, was Radiohead's follow-up to their breakout success with Pablo Honey, '93, though let's be fair, it was pretty much more so just a follow-up to the song Creep, because that's all anyone cared about. That being said, this album actually barely sounds like Pablo Honey at all, and marks the direction Radiohead would start going in future projects. It's very well liked today. There's definitely an appeal to it that I understand.
By early 1994, Pablo Honey had proved itself to be a smashing success, going on to sell nearly 2 million copies worldwide. The band was selling out stadiums left and right, and Creep was playing non-stop on radios worldwide. I guess you could even say they were the head of the radio. With all this success, naturally, the band was miserable, especially frontman Thom Yorke. He hated Creep and felt embarrassed by its edgy virgin lyrics, which random people now parroted back at him everywhere he went.
I remember there was some Steve Wright thing. Did you ever hear that? The thing when they did a version of Creep? They changed one of the verses and said, oh, we're just a bunch of melodramatic schoolboys. I thought, yeah. That's what it looks like.
Worse yet, their record label now expected a follow-up single just as popular as Creep, which would not prove an easy feat. Though an EP would be released later that same year, it sold poorly, not even coming close to EMI's high expectations. This did not help matters. Ironically enough, the lead song off the EP, My Iron Lung, was a song complaining about Creep and how the band felt boxed in by its success. One of the only positive things to come out of the release of this EP was the band's introduction to producer Nigel Godrich, aka the man who would go on to produce each and every Radiohead album from that point on. Now the pressure was really on to create a follow-up that did as well as Pablo Honey had, else the band risked falling out of favor with EMI. It's been described as one of the most stressful periods in the band's life. Colin Greenwood described it as 8 weeks of hell and torture. It seemed hopeless until Jeff Buckley flew into town to perform a show, and Thom decided to go. While watching, he was blown away at how much confidence Buckley had in his higher register. The raw emotions in his performance seemed to bring out the beauty in the songs he was singing. When Thom got home that night, he finally knew what direction he wanted to take the project in. So, after months and months of hard work, the band's sophomore album was finally completed. Titled The Bends, and featuring an orgasming crash test dummy on its cover, for some reason, it was released on March 13th, 1995. This album can only be described as a step in the right direction. The songwriting is more melodic and tender than what we got last time. The lyrics more conceptual, the production more dynamic, thanks to Godrich's presence, and co-producer John Leckie, who was very experienced in the world of art rock. And many of the songs here are unplugged, putting a lot more focus on acoustic guitar than electric. I think a song like Fake Plastic Trees exemplifies all of this and more. Just listen to those synths and keyboards that underline the rhythm guitar. There's so much more variety in this song's instrumentation than anything you'd hear on Pablo Honey. The song also has a lot more to say conceptually than anything you'd find on the band's first outing, taking a stance against consumerism and corporate overproduction. Apparently, Thom broke down crying when he first tried to record this song, so that's how you know it's sad. It's on this album that Thom went all in on his falsetto, which is a big improvement over... As he later said, Jeff Buckley gave me the confidence to sing falsetto, so you can thank Jeff Buckley. You can hear his silky falsetto in full force on the track Bulletproof, a hauntingly beautiful track as simplistic as it is. It was clear that the band had moved away from grunge and more towards, whatever comes after grunge. Maybe we should call it post-grunge or something. Now, with all this praise I've been dishing out, I think it's worth clarifying that I, Grinch that I am, still find this album to be a flawed product. I know I'm letting you guys down. I wasn't even trying to make a reference there. It happened by accident. Some of the songs on here, like Black Star, make use of the same bland production that I criticized on Pablo Honey. And on that note, I think one could, if they wanted to, lampoon this album for being a bit on the soggy side. It's very emotional, especially on tracks like Nice Dream, but not in the cleverly subtle, melancholy way later Radiohead albums would handle emotion. Here it's a lot more in your face. Not as bad as like Coldplay or something, but you know. This album did kind of spawn Coldplay, so that's a sin this album won't be able to atone for.
That was a joke, I'm joking.
I mean, some of these songs sound almost Britpop in nature. I also think that the title track, which tries to sound like a hard rock track, just straight up sucks.
I wish that someone would.
It is, however, undeniable that the songwriting on The Bends is much more complex than it was on Pablo Honey. For instance, the song just uses the symmetric scale, which means alternating whole and half notes, to create a frantic-sounding riff that climbs ever upwards. The biggest hit off this album is High and Dry, a song that Thom Yorke hates, because of course he does. Don't believe me? That motherfucker hasn't played it live since 1998. In fact, they wouldn't have included it on the album at all if EMI hadn't forced them to do it due to its radio-friendly nature. Now, personally, I like it fine, but I can't see why Thom doesn't, being that it's fairly run-of-the-mill. Though I will say that the main guitar hook of the track is very catchy, and actually a lot more complicated to play than it sounds. My favorite track on this album, if I'm being honest, is the closing track, Street Spirit, Fade Out. A song that's basically just one giant existential crisis about the futility of life. Lovely. The tone of this track sounds hopeless, and yet as it builds, there's a kind of determination to it. I love the arpeggiation of the song's chords, and I'm glad it's something the band decided to keep doing on future albums. This song would work great in a movie if it were playing during a scene that reveals a huge groundbreaking twist that changes everything. Yeah, I like those kinds of songs. When all was said and done, The Bends had revealed itself to be a massive critical and commercial success for the band, which we should be thankful for, since it paved the path for what would come next.
Amnesiac was released in 2001 as an immediate follow-up to the band's polarizing 2000 LP, Kid A. It was originally going to be released with Kid A as a double album, but ultimately the band decided to release it as its own project, as it is in many ways distinct from Kid A, though you can definitely hear the similarities. A lot of people malign this project as just the B-sides to Kid A, and I don't think that's entirely fair, but I can kind of get where they're coming from.
The turn of the millennium marked a new era of Radiohead with the release of Kid A. It was the greatest left turn in the history of music, according to some pretentious music critics, and fans were left shocked by how different the album sounded from what they were used to. To make matters even harder to process, fans barely had time to sit with the album before Radiohead released a follow-up just 7 months later, titled Amnesiac. Right from the first few seconds of Sardines, fans knew, uh-oh, this album's gonna be just as weird as Kid A. Now, as I mentioned, Amnesiac was recorded in the same studio sessions that spawned Kid A, and as such, the similarities between the two albums are very apparent. There's even a remix of a song from Kid A on here. However, the songs on Amnesiac are stylistically distinct from those of Kid A. For starters, this album is a lot more stripped back. Whereas Kid A presents listeners with a cacophony of instruments and a maximalist soundscape of computery beeps and boops, Amnesiac dials it all back. A lot of songs on here have no more than 2 instruments playing at a time. That's not to say that the album doesn't go big in places, because it absolutely does, but it keeps those moments few and far between, only hitting us with them after it feels that it has earned it with a sufficient build-up. One thing that the album does inarguably share in common with Kid A is that it sounds bleak. This tracklist is depressing, and Thom sings about cutting kids in half and other edgy shit. Themes of isolation and alienation carry over from Kid A, but this time, instead of focusing in on society as much, it homes in on how this affects the individual. Anxiety, depression, amnesia, You and Whose Army and Dollars and Cents explore political alienation. Life in a Glass House explores paranoia in a world with increasingly less privacy. I Might Be Wrong explores existential dread. The album overall also explores how one can lose their sense of identity in the modern world the same way an amnesiac might lose their memories. Memory in general, and how it pertains to one's identity, is a common theme amongst this album's lyrics. Pyramid Song especially displays this, and on the topic of Pyramid Song, that track is gorgeous. The rhythm on the song is extremely atypical, and some people have even theorized that it's meant to represent the shape of a pyramid itself. I don't really care, to be honest. about bullshit like that. What I do care about is how beautiful and memorable the rhythm of the song is, despite its irregularity. To make matters even more nuanced, the drums play a slightly different rhythm from the piano. If you want to investigate this further, there's a great video on it by the channel Listening In. Thom himself said that this is one of the most beautiful songs the band ever put to tape, and you know what? I can't disagree with him. It's the best song on the album, for sure. Nevertheless, some of the songs on here, one could argue, are a bit drab and even empty in places. The track Hunting Bears, for instance, has pretty much nothing to offer aside from a semi-interesting guitar riff, and might as well not even be on the album. That's the main criticism most people level against this album, that it feels like the less polished, less finished version of Kid A. It's undeniable that it has all-time great songs to offer, but as a whole, it's just not as stacked with great musicianship in the way that many other Radiohead albums are. It's also worth mentioning that just last year, the band re-released this project along with Kid A as a double album, as it was originally intended to be, titled Kid Named Amnesiac. No, sorry, just Kid Amnesiac. I need to purge my head of fucking Breaking Bad memes before it kills me.
I got one question. Shoot. Do you believe in society's lies?
In 2003, the members of Radiohead were all sitting around a table, and they just looked at each other and said, "I hate George Bush." And then that hatred fueled them to make an album about how much they hate the political landscape in general. And it is their edgiest album to date. Contrarians nationwide proclaim this to be the best Radiohead album, and they're wrong, but it's still a damn solid album.
Hey you. Yeah, you. Did you know we live in a society? And here's a follow-up question. Are you a fan of politics in music? What's that? You answered no? Wrong. You see, most people don't even realize that many of their favorite songs are inherently political in nature. Well, if you happen to like music by Pink Floyd, Rage Against the Machine, System of a Down, Marvin Gaye, M.I.A., Green Day, The Clash, Kendrick Lamar, Lauryn Hill, Eminem, Nas, Lil Nas X, N.W.A., Black Thought, Bob Marley, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, U2, Neil Young, The Cranberries, John Lennon, George Harrison, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Simon & Garfunkel, Frank Zappa, Nina Simone, Woody Guthrie, and many, many more, then I'm afraid to tell you, you may have been listening to political music this whole time. And hey, that's not a bad thing, because music that takes a stand on an important issue can be very powerful. It's just that a lot of this music ages so well that it doesn't even seem political anymore after the fact. A song like Hurricane by Bob Dylan criticizing the wrongful imprisonment of black people might seem trivial and obvious today, but when it was released, it was controversial and risky subject matter for a songwriter to touch. Furthermore, the fact that a song like American Idiot by Green Day is anti-war might not even register to a modern listener who is not aware of the context in which it was released. And as for political songs that don't age well, those ones are a special breed. Likewise, Hail to the Thief, Radiohead's 6th studio album, was taking a massive risk by being an overt critique of Mr. Bush, and by extension the rise of nationalism following 9/11. If I'm being honest though, I think it generally paid off. Sure, maybe some of the terminology used on the album is a tad unsubtle, and maybe some of it, like 2 + 2 = 5, has gone on to be just as much of an infamous straw man as yelling, "This is literally 1984!" But let us not forget, this is George Bush they were criticizing. This is a man whose policies were so stupid and his supporters so blindly loyal that he might as well have operated on a platform of 2 + 2 = 5.
Our enemies are innovative and resourceful, and so are we. They never stop thinking about new ways to harm our country and our people, and neither do we.
In terms of how this music sounds, it's like Kid A had a baby with OK Computer and then that baby did a lot of coke. There are synthesizers and drum machines all over this thing, and some of the most high energy sounds the band has ever released crop up. One thing I love about this album is the large amount of variety between the tracks. You can listen to this thing from front to back and never feel like it's being repetitive except for when the gloaming is on. There are many different influences being pulled on this project, Backdrift sounds like an Aphex Twin song, Go to Sleep sounds like a mid-70s Led Zeppelin song, Where I End and You Begin sounds like a Bjork song, A Punch Up at a Wedding sounds like a track from a random spy movie, A Wolf at the Door sounds like a car seat headrest song and they weren't even a band yet when this album came out, and yet each song still has a clear underlying Radiohead style to it. That being said, it's not the most focused of Radiohead albums. One consequence of having so much variety is that the album can feel a little all over the place. On that note, many feel that this track list is a little on the bloated side, including Ed O'Brien himself. As he later said, "We should have pruned it down to 10 songs. Then it would have been a really good record. Working on In Rainbows, I was aware that we were making something that was really engaging, that moved people again, and I don't think Hail to the Thief consistently did that. I think we lost people on a couple tracks and it broke the spell of the record." Colin felt the same way, specifically lambasting The Gloaming as being unfinished.
That won't stop Thom from playing it live 5,000 times though.
There's also a simplicity and honesty to the production of these songs that most likely comes about as the result of the fact that the band tried to record each track in one perfect take, as opposed to toiling with the track over time, adding on layers and layers of effects and adornments as they had done with their last few records. Unfortunately, there are some fairly lackluster tracks on here that shall remain nameless.
We want the young blood. We're gonna suck the young blood to keep us going, you know?
But even so, this project has some of my favorite Radiohead songs on it.
Just 'cause you feel it doesn't mean it's there.
Between Where I End and You Begin, There, and A Wolf at the Door, this album packs a punch. I would have to say that musically, There is my favorite, but the lyrics to Wolf at the Door are so visceral that I can't forget them. The song tells the story of a man being threatened by the big bad wolf, saying he'll take his children if he doesn't pay a bounty. But he doesn't have the money to pay it. So what's he gonna do? By the way, the wolf equals the government, if you weren't already getting that. Damn, this shit's almost as deep as Pitchfork's review of Kid A.
I had never seen a shooting star before. The butterscotch lamps along the walls of the tight city square blared upward into the cobalt sky, which seemed as strikingly artificial and perfect as a wizard's cap. The Italians surrounding me held their breath in communion, save for the drunken few shouting "Cripe."
Absolute classic. According to Ed O'Brien, this was the first album the band ever made that they, quote, didn't want to kill each other after completing. So that shows growth.
A Moon-Shaped Pool remains the most recent Radiohead release. It hit the shelves in 2016 and was proven by science to be the saddest Radiohead album. This is likely due in large part to the fact that this album was recorded as Thom Yorke's marriage of many years was falling apart, and many see this to be a return to form for the band after The King of Limbs.
Let's jump all the way forward to the year of our Lord, 2016, when edgelords reigned over the internet and YouTube was nothing but SJW-owned compilations and stolen vines. A simpler time, truly. Over the last decade, the band had been drifting apart, and they were making no attempts to even hide this. I don't mean to say that they were at odds with each other, merely that each member was getting pulled away by their own solo careers. Ed O'Brien doesn't mince his words when he says that Radiohead, whilst having never formally broken up, essentially doesn't exist anymore. But he also keeps saying that they might make another album, but they also might not. But they might. I think we're being gaslit. It was a tumultuous time in the band's life. Producer Nigel Godrich lost his father immediately before work on the new album began. And as I mentioned, Thom's marriage fell apart. Not only that, but it was shortly after the release of this album that she also passed away, dealing another blow to Thom. The album, released in spring, was titled A Moon-Shaped Pool. And it's a sad motherfucker. This album makes use of piano more than any other Radiohead project, and the songs feel especially gentle this time around, like you're floating in some kind of celestial pool that also happens to be moon-shaped. Gone is the harsh, loud experimentation of The King of Limbs. This album is a lullaby for very, very sad people. But of course, no Radiohead album is complete without some bangers, not even one about loss. Still gotta have the lost bangers. The opening track is Burn the Witch, and it sounds impeccable, making use of a harsh string section to form its bassline rhythm. As Johnny Greenwood put it, "We left it unfinished on purpose and left lots of room for the strings, and we never do that usually. Usually the strings are the icing on top." That's how Johnny talks, right? Now, based on the name of this track and the lyrics and the music video for that matter, you may be inclined to think that this is a song about the dreaded cancel culture. And that might be essentially correct, but remember, the term cancel culture didn't exist when this track came out because the world was a significantly less cringy place back then. However, it is most definitely a song about mob mentality and social ostracization. Politics weaves its way into this album in various places.
I'm doing the Brexit thing. I've got a gun to my head. Like, you're gonna give me what I want, right?
But it's a lot more subtle than on projects like Hail to the Thief. It's no secret that the band members are not a fan of Donald Trump, so considering the contentious political climate of 2016, it's unsurprising that allusions to the current state of affairs pop up. The next track, Daydreaming, is a gorgeous laid-back exploration into fantasies. Apparently it's also about Plato's cave. I wouldn't have guessed that, but it's what Genius says, so it must be true. I love the spacey, dreamy production on this track, but my favorite thing about it is the glorious music video it presented us with in which Thom gets lost. I don't know why I find Thom being lost as funny as I do, but I find it very funny. A lot of the cuts on this LP hit on that sad, heartbroken vibe I've been talking about. In fact, there's not quite as much variety between songs on this record as one may be accustomed to from Radiohead. I don't think that's an accident, as this album is aiming to provide a very specific experience to a listener. I just think that it's worth noting that this album is unlikely to pull as diverse an audience as other projects as a consequence of this. It's also less likely to be an album you'll want to revisit, especially if you're in a good mood, since most of the songs hit on that same depressed vibe. Even so, gotta give it props, this album does nail that vibe. The track Present Tense will suck a listener in with its echoey arpeggiated guitar line and great vocal performance from York. Additionally, a lot of the songs on here had been floating around for years before the album's release in some form or another, whether in the form of live performances or demos. The most famous example of this is True Love Waits, the album's closer. It's another sad motherfucker, made evident by the desperate lyrics. And though it obviously evokes thoughts of the divorce Thom was going through when it was released, it was actually written way back in 1995 during a tour to promote the Bends. I can't say it's my most revisited Radiohead LP, but this album is great, and I don't have any reservations calling it that. I would argue that the best track the album has to offer is the hypnotizing Present Tense. And I know everyone will be mad at me for not saying Daydreaming is my favorite. Okay, it's my opinion. I'm sorry, but you're going to have to live with it, okay? Why don't you go daydream a reality where that's my favorite track if it means so much to you? If there's one thing I believe we can all find common ground on, it's the fact that Thom's funny little dances are great and we want to see more of them.
Lemons.
Lemons?
Yeah, you suck on them.
Oh, come on. Let's give me the crackers.
Now suck on a lemon here.
I had never seen the night sky shining so brightly. The tranquil, regurgitated colors of the stars reminded me vividly of the echoey, gooey bass playing of the man Colin Greenwood. The sunburned cacophony of sounds melting out of the sky went straight into my nostrils. God whispered, everything is in its right place, as a wave of music and Thom Yorke's Come shot at me from the sewers and blinded my soul, but liberated my spirit. That was my pitchfork-styled introduction to the segment. Now I'm going to talk about the album in English.
Right now I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated because I would have loved to put this album at number 1. I really would have. And I also would have loved to put the album above it at number 1. I know I've said this before, but I think it applies in this case more than it ever has before. These top few albums are so close in quality that it was a bitch to have to rank them. And frankly, in many ways, all of them kind of deserve to be number 1, but they couldn't be. So being that I was forced to order them, this is the order I've chosen. Kid A was released right at the turn of the millennium in 2000, and what better of a time could Radiohead have picked to release it? Not only was the world in a new millennium, but Radiohead was in a new phase. Kid A, aka the biggest left turn in musical history according to the internet, sounded practically nothing like anything Radiohead had put out before.
After the raging success of OK Computer, EMI had a raging boner for a new Radiohead project. With all the success and riches OK Computer had brought them, Radiohead were just as happy as one may expect. And that is to say, they weren't happy at all. The OK Computer tour had been a nightmare, plagued by technical issues and a general feeling of burnout. Once the band returned to the studio to begin work on their next project, they couldn't do it. The looping process of album, tour, album, tour, album, tour was driving them, especially Thom, insane.
You know, we just do new songs because otherwise we go mad. Yeah, you just get so bored, there's no danger or anything. It's like, you know, you're a karaoke machine.
To make matters worse, each member wanted to take the band in a different creative direction. For a time, it seemed as if Radiohead may have ended then and there. But then Thom listened to Aphex Twin, and then he listened to Can, and then he listened to a few other things and said, "Hold on, guys. I have an idea. Let's drop the rock from alternative rock and just make music that's alternative." Now, under normal circumstances, EMI likely would have objected to this, but the band had just proven themselves with OK Computer, even though the label had initially thought it sounded weird, so this time EMI gave them complete autonomy. And they took that autonomy and used it to create something that is distinctly not a rock album. In fact, it's not a normal album by any means.
There's a great story that one of our managers, Bryce, says that when they first played it to the publishing company, and we just re-signed with them, and they're expecting, like, you know, guitars. The first song, Everything's the Right Place, not a guitar. The second song, Kid A, not a guitar. The third song, National Anthem, not a guitar. And they're literally sweating.
The second you hit play, you're hit with this. Gone are the guitars, gone are regular drums, gone is Thom's normal singing voice. Replacing them are cold, robotic-sounding synthesizers and robotic, manipulated vocals. It sounds like nothing the band had done before. It doesn't even sound like something else you would have heard on the radio in 2000. However, as the song builds, traces of the familiar Radiohead start to present themselves. Thom's voice does come into the mix in a more recognizable fashion when he begins proclaiming that yesterday he woke up sucking on a lemon. Still makes me cry every time I hear it. There is a melancholy emotional presence to the track that makes itself more apparent as time builds. However, it's executed in a vastly different way from what fans would have been expecting. Where OK Computer had walked, Kid A ran. Where OK Computer had experimented with drum machines and synthesizers, Kid A embraced them. It's clear that the band took strong influence from Aphex Twin, who can probably be described as the single most ahead of his time individual to ever live, with the exception of Diogenes, of course. Fun fact, he also dislikes Radiohead. So I guess not everyone sees imitation as the most sincere form of flattery. The title track, Kid A, is in many ways just as much of a soundscape as it is a song. Each track on this record provides something slightly different. The national anthem brings back alternative rock, but mixes it with Charles Mingus-inspired free jazz. How to Disappear completely takes the style from OK Computer but modulates it with synthesizers, and it's a song about social anxiety and not feeling like you fit in. How very Radiohead. Optimistic is one of the only tracks on the record to feature electric guitars, showing how far the band had strayed from the days of Pablo Honey, and yet it uses them in a completely different, muddy way.
You try the best you can, try the best you can, the best you can is good enough.
One of the most distinct tracks from Kid A is Idiotech, an entirely electronic track helmed by a haunting chord progression. Everything about how this song sounds is alien.
A bit faster, Johnny.
The lyrics describe a nightmare scenario in which the rapid, unchecked progression of technology leads to a nuclear holocaust, and the last survivors are slowly driven insane by their new environment. One of the most impressive things about Kid A is that despite removing most of the human aspects of the music on the surface level, leaving a cold metallic husk in its place, at its core, this is one of their most human projects. Every song has deep emotion at its core. The concept behind this album is, as you may have guessed, a dystopian future in which human life has lost its meaning. The name itself, Kid A, is what Thom said he thinks the first human clone will be called. Apparently, people in the future are just going to get really lazy with naming. The artificial, robotic sound of the music is the environment that he expects a child would have to grow up in. Now, I know this all sounds very doom and gloom, and it is, but there's still beauty that can be found in the midst of Kid A's pessimism. Of course, there's the track Optimistic that proclaims even in the face of a collapsing society, you can try the best you can is good enough. But I think the best example is a hidden track that plays at the end of the record. It's nothing but a heavenly sounding hum. It's short and it doesn't change much, and yet, after listening to the dreariness that is Kid A, it sounds so beautiful. Does this represent something important? Is Thom trying to say that even if technology leads us into a nightmare scenario, there's still light at the end of the tunnel? Who am I to say? We're going to have to experience hell first before we can know if there's a heaven. Damn, that was deep. I should write for Pitchfork. In terms of things to criticize, well, there's not much. All I can think of is the track Tree Fingers, which is a 4-minute drone of nothingness. Unlike the hidden track at the end, it doesn't make me feel any emotion, it just kind of makes me want to hit the skip button. Tree Fingers or no, I can't deny how distinctive the production on this album is, and I'm amazed at how easily Nigel Godrich was able to completely change gears to make this album sound as good as it does.
You know, Nigel and you have built such an incredibly strong, creative environment for each other, obviously, to trust each other. And when did you realize you trusted him enough to value his opinion like that? Was it immediately?
Kid A.
Kid A.
OK Computer was like, still, I'm not sure about this guy. I was actually watching him take this chaos that we were giving him and trying to turn it into something. I was like, all right, I trust you.
I think the creme de la creme of Kid A is Idiotech, but it has a lot of competition for that title, trust me. Kid A was a huge gamble, and artistically it paid off brilliantly. Economically, it didn't perform as well as their prior album, though it did still hit #1, which is amazing for an album that pulls so much influence from the underground. It's a wonder to me that an album can be this good and this influential, and still not be their best.
This is fucking wicked. I'm almost definitely a musical genius.
OK Computer, Radiohead's 1997 magnum opus, and considered by many to be the best album of all time. The fact that it's not the only Radiohead album that has that decoration should tell you all you need to know about the band. It was with this album that Radiohead really decided to delve into more abstract subject matter and bring in those kooky synthesizers that would define so much of their music going forward.
The Bends may have been an improvement over Pablo Honey, a sign that the band planned to take things in a new, more alternative direction, but Radiohead weren't done innovating. In fact, they weren't even close. Sure, the sad boy falsetto voice acoustic guitar pop rock sound of the Bends had caught on like wildfire, to the point where it seemed like the band couldn't possibly be any more ahead of their time, but somehow, they managed it. Since they'd proved themselves to be more than just a one-hit wonder after the success of the Bends, EMI backed off a little and gave Radiohead more creative control over their work, and believe me, they took that creative control and ran with it. First, they released a single EP, Paranoid Android, commissioned for a charity drive led by Brian Eno. It displayed much more intricacy in its arrangement than anything else the band had released up to that point. Paranoid Android is a multi-sectional alt-rock suite. The song makes use of various time signatures, including 7/4, which more musicians should use, but everyone is afraid of it for some reason. It also features extremely complex guitar work from Johnny. From multi-track layering to phased pedals to the schizophrenic solo, the irregularity of the chords themselves, it's pure craftsmanship. And then, on the 21st of May 1997, Radiohead officially released their third studio album, OK Computer. Thom and company weren't playing around this time. This was Radiohead all grown up. Gone are the generic, flat songs of Pablo Honey. Each song on OK Computer has a sheen of polish coated on top of it, and you can hear right away with the album's opener, Airbag, a song about how humans are becoming over-reliant on technology to the point of dependence. Like an airbag. The song makes use of sampling, a first for the band, specifically by chopping up clips of Philip's drumming. There's a clear theme underlying this project, and that's one of anti-consumerism, following in the footsteps of fake plastic trees.
What is it, every fourth dollar in America is spent on marketing? True, they're making a fortune. These people are.
In case you missed it, interlude Fitter Happier, made with an Apple's text-to-speech voice, will beat this album's anti-consumerist message right in your skull.
On antibiotics.
In terms of how the songs are written, OK Computer bounces between many different modes for its chord progressions, like Aeolian and Dorian. The song Lucky switches from Aeolian in the verses to Dorian in the chorus to create a transition from melancholy into the uplifting. That being said, a clear favorite mode that establishes itself on this album is Mixolydian, which appears on tracks like Airbag and Subterranean Homesick Alien. When it comes to instrumentation, it's easier to list the types of instruments that don't appear on OK Computer than the ones that do. Choirs, violins, cellos, glockenspiels, tambourines, synths, mellotrons, computers, every instrument under the sun contributed to this album in some way. The track Climbing the Walls features an entire orchestra composed by Johnny Greenwood just to add a powerful, eerie backing to the chords. This album is layered with the sorts of glitchy, computery sounds that Aphex Twin loves so much, and it fits perfectly with the theme of the album, painting the image of a technological dystopia. It's very fitting that a song on here, Exit Music for a Film, was used in Black Mirror. If I were to list every song on this record that I think is great, I would list every track on the album except for Fitter Happier and Electioneering. And those aren't even that bad, they're just not as good as the rest of the record. Because it's a Radiohead album, of course feelings of alienation from society continue to be prevalent within the lyrics of these songs, including a song that's about a literal alien observing humanity. The track Let Down, on top of being Radiohead's most underrated song, is about how life can never seem to deliver on its promises. Phony emotions are so prevalent in the world that it's very difficult to feel anything real anymore. However, the song is quite goofy and satirical at its core, however dark it may seem at first.
The biggest battle I have at the moment is to persuade people that a lot of the lyrics I write are very funny.
I think there's a lot of humour in our records, actually, to be honest.
Paranoid Android is definitely a joke. You can't possibly take that song completely seriously.
Hence the Gucci little piggy line.
If there's one thing I can truly say OK Computer does better than any other Radiohead record, it's how well the album achieves a feeling of bittersweetness. No Surprises mixes a cheerful glockenspiel and a happy-go-lucky melody with a dreary overtone and dark lyrics to create an ominously uplifting mood. This theme of underlying tension is complemented by a music video in which water slowly rises until Thom Yorke drowns. Another way the track manages to feel happy and yet surreptitiously gloomy is by taking a progression that should regularly resolve with a major chord and swapping it out to a minor chord. There's something I find incredibly three-dimensional about songs that immediately sound happy, but once you delve further into them and unpeel its layers, the truth begins to present itself. For this reason, I think it's the best track on the album, though a big part of me also wants to award that title to Paranoid Android just for how much I respect that track. There's a reason you'll see OK Computer topping Best Album of the 90s and even Best Album of All Time lists left and right, and it's because of how truly inventive, polished, and re-listenable this project is. Not only was it a massive critical success, but OK Computer also went on to be the band's all-time best-selling record. By far. Radiohead set a standard with this release, and their peers knew it. It seemed like it would be impossible to top. And yet.
We released our new album in rainbows. Can you tell me Can you tell me? Can the panel tell me what was special about that? That was good, wasn't it?
What is a perfect Radiohead album? What elements would it have to possess to earn that title? Would it be the catchiest album, or perhaps the most meaningful album? Or how about the most experimental album? Or would it be a project that manages to encapsulate all of these qualities at once? An album that's catchy, but also experimental. Meaningful, but also subtle. Emotional, but not cheesy. If you manage to combine all of these qualities into a single album, it would be In Rainbows.
What can I really say about In Rainbows that hasn't already been said? This album brought so many things the band had been working on together on previous projects and perfected it. It was released in 2007, for free mind you, and pretty much stands as a testament to what you can do when you spend a decade honing your abilities in multiple different genres and then pool them all together. This album brings that more experimental and cold sound that was perfected on Kid A, but also that warmth and melodic songwriting of an album like OK Computer. These two sounds combined create not only the most re-listenable Radiohead album, but just a musical experience? That sounds pretentious, but I don't know how the fuck else to word it.
If you've been paying attention, you may recall all the way back at the beginning of this video when I was talking about the day Radiohead were signed to their first record label, EMI. They finally got some heads turning, and shortly thereafter secured a deal with EMI for not one, but 6 albums. They signed a contract to produce 6 albums for the label, no more, no less. And if you were really paying attention, you'll also recall that 2003's Hail to the Thief was the band's 6th album, which means, as of the moment that the album was released, the band's contract was officially at an end, and they were free. Appreciating all the label had done for them, Thom gave a very thankful, respectful middle finger to EMI, and then parted ways with the label for good, taking Nigel Godrich with them. That'll teach him a lesson for forcing High and Dry onto the Bends, those cretins. So now the band could finally, truly do whatever they wanted. Thom Yorke released his first solo album. Johnny Greenwood, who had already composed the soundtrack for the film Body Song in 2003, continued to score other movies, most notably the excellent There Will Be Blood, in which he perfected the art of terrifying overtones. After a few years of hiatus, the band regrouped and began work on their 7th album. But things took longer than usual this time around due to the fact that the songs they were working on kept getting more and more complex with time. It wasn't until autumn of 2007 that the album was finally completed, but remember, Radiohead were no longer working with the label. They could release this album any way they wanted. Nothing was too outlandish, not even releasing it for free. And that's exactly what they did. On the 10th of October, In Rainbows suddenly appeared for download on Radiohead's website, with the option given to pay any amount of money if you wanted to, but it wasn't required.
The great thing about this was, and the reason we've been people have slagged us off within the industry as well, they don't like it because this wasn't about the money. This was about the spirit of the thing, and that's why it was so exciting, the spirit of the thing, and obviously we hope to make money out of it, but it's not about being greedy, and that's the thing, and it's getting that whole thing about what's exciting about music. It's the spirit.
At the time, this was considered radical. Today, no one would bat an eye because that's literally what Bandcamp is. Either way, if that doesn't prove that money isn't what the band is after, I don't know what does. Part of what incentivized the band to release their album themselves was the fact that they could release it the minute it was done instead of sitting on it for months, opening the door for potential leaks.
When you finish a record, you've got this 3-month lead time that everything, all the parts have to get in place. And it's so frustrating. You finish this record, you want people to hear it, and then it's like another quarter of a year, it can be half a year almost.
Previous albums of yours had been leaked on the net.
Everything, even my record, everything had been leaked. And part of that was down to the mass production element of things. It doesn't matter what you do, some bugger's going to put it up on the net and go and think they're really clever. The idea was just to say, well, nobody gets it free at all, as an experiment.
The opening track of In Rainbows, 15-Step, sounds like a continuation of the synthetic Kid A style, with its hyperdrive drum machine. But the song quickly branches out into more than just that. Almost immediately, Philip's drums begin to intermingle with the loop's drum sample, creating a complex tangle of percussion. Listeners are then greeted with a warm, friendly-sounding guitar riff that forms the backbone of the track. All of these aspects together, the cold mixing with the warmth, creates what honestly feels like the best of both worlds where Radiohead is concerned. What people loved about OK Computer and what people loved about Kid A dovetail on almost every track here. The experimentation and complex songwriting of 2000s Radiohead remains ever present, but it is filtered through the late 90s Radiohead instrumentation style. The electric guitars, glockenspiels, and orchestras that defined OK Computer all make a triumphant return on this project. There are also aspects of Hail to the Thief that come into play on this record, such as the muddy production style and the large amounts of musical variety between tracks. The first two tracks on In Rainbows are great, but it's with track 3 that I think the album delivers one of few Radiohead songs I would describe as perfect.
Now that you feel
Yeah, this is one of the prettiest songs I've ever heard. It's like the auditory equivalent of watching glass shatter in slow motion. Something that should be unsettling and scary is slowed down and scaled back to the point that it becomes beautiful. The song was originally written during the OK Computer sessions, but the band wasn't satisfied with it until Colin Greenwood reworked the bass line to be less simplistic, and the rest of the track was reconstructed around that foundation. The song is about the dangers of mindless conformity and the importance of free thought, even if you feel exposed. Nude, even. Criticizing society? I know. Rare for Radiohead. The next song, Weird Fishes, is another song that I would call perfect. The arpeggiated guitar line making use of modulated 7th chords sounds pristine.
they turn me.
When I listen to this, I feel like I'm phasing out of reality. As the tracklist continues, it becomes clear that there are no misses here. Every song is weaved meticulously. This is in large part thanks to the excellent production of Nigel Godrich, who took the time to tweak each and every last detail until every component of every song complemented the others. Colin Greenwood said Nigel recorded the smudges and fingerprints of these rooms and put them back into the sound later, like the reverb on the House of Cards vocal. His computer is like a rattle bag. He can pick out any sound, irrespective of where he recorded it, then map it onto a track we recorded somewhere else. Amazing. Evidently, Colin had never heard of GarageBand. When I said that Kid A had a subtle beauty in the midst of its misery, I wasn't lying. However, that album is still, for the most part, very depressing. In Rainbows feels extraordinarily uplifting to listen to. That is, in a bizarre, alien kind of way. It's like, if Kid A is the soundtrack to our dystopian future, then In Rainbows is the soundtrack that immediately follows that, after the world order finally collapses and the first flower in hundreds of years manages to bloom. Something about this album, especially gentler tracks like House of Cards, sounds slightly optimistic in a way Kid A didn't, even though Kid A had a track on it called Optimistic. Sure, we might get taken over by robots, but maybe those robots will learn how to love. You know? Then you have the track Jigsaw falling into place, one of the album's leading singles, which feels to me like a pure adrenaline rush. The song begins with a manic guitar line and then slowly builds over its runtime. By the end of its runtime, the song is so powerful that it's borderline anthemic. Even PewDiePie likes the song.
Have you Zoomer listened to this? This is real music.
The album draws to a close with Videotape, the most depressing song on the album, reminding you that this is still Radiohead. Everything, no matter how happy it seems, has a sad ending. There's actually a lot of music theory behind this song that is almost invisible to anyone listening. The main piano line is actually syncopated, slightly behind the beat, and you can hear that plainly in an early version of the song.
I won't be afraid.
the finalized, stripped-back version, it's a lot harder to tell, however.
This is my way out, saying goodbye.
Some people prefer the original high-energy version, but I think this stripped-back version does work better as a closer for this album. By the way, if you're curious about this, there's an entire Vox video on it, so you could go check that out. I've made clear that I think this album is stellar musically, but what about lyrically? Well, this album is a lot less of a concept album than Kid A was. The lyrics are a lot more applicable to the everyday person, especially the everyday depressed person. There's even a track on here, All I Need, that has the same concept behind it as Creep, a man who can't find love, but it's handled a lot more eloquently this time. House of Cards is another love song, though this one focuses on what it's like to be in love with someone who's taken.
I don't wanna be your friend, I just wanna be your lover.
All across this album, from 15 Step to Videotape, are lyrics about everyday life, frustrations the average person is likely to encounter, and I think it makes for one of the most approachable Radiohead albums in that respect. Ultimately, I could talk about In Rainbows for hours and not find anything substantial to criticize. From track to track, I love everything here. It's extremely difficult for me to even pick a favorite track off this album between Nude, Weird Fishes, and Jigsaw falling into place, but I think Weird Fishes narrowly edges them out as my favorite song. It doesn't matter either way because every track on here has something of its own to offer. I'm still listening to this thing constantly, and I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. Sure, it doesn't have the undeniable influence of an OK Computer or a Kid A, but to say this album wasn't still influential over the alternative musical sphere would be a big fat lie. Regardless, just looking at this as an album, isolated from the rest of their catalog, I think this stands as the best Radiohead album purely in terms of its listenability and its impact on a listener.
I'm so glad we could go on this musical experience together. It truly was a magical time. Now we can all bask in the fact that when you actually look at an image of Radiohead, they look like a bunch of convicted sex offenders. Get this shit off me. Get this fucking shit off me.